interesting. Private schools means usually the kind of school you'd have on your commune, because a public school was what your kids left home during the day and would go to a school. And there were songs that were the rage then, reading and writing and arithmetic taught to the tune of a hickory stick, meaning that the teacher was the big cheese. And in the beginning, I'd say certainly in the 50s and 60s, most of those teachers were women, a lot because they were not very lucrative jobs. They were low-paying jobs and the kind of jobs women took. And there was also, women had a lot more tolerance for a variety of children in the classroom, from their habits of picking their nose to cheating to writing legibly. These were kinds of things that came up a lot. Most everybody grew up with public schools. I didn't really know private school people except as I would meet in my travels, people whose family sent them to private schools. Often they sent them to private schools because they thought the education was better and more detailed. I was very glad to go to school. I was a very good student. Things were easy. And what that meant is that not easy, yes, I got good grades, but what was easy was a subject was easy. So it's interesting, math was often easier for men. And yet, if you were a, quote, good student, most everything could be good for you. And I loved going to school. I didn't skip school very much. It was a place, before junior high school and high school, where you're also thinking about dating, you would have playmates because there was a recess. Recess meant play, free play. Maybe it got more organized as time went on. So there were dodgeball games and marbles. I remember that was really big in the school ground when I grew up. And boy, I was a good student, and I could tell that the teacher really mattered to me. And not so much the brown-nosing and that kind of thing, although if you were a, quote, good student and got good grades, often the teacher liked you differently than they liked the students that didn't try. Often the students that were thought of as bad students, it wasn't so much that they were not smart enough for school. Their home life or the school life that they had before was not conducive to being interested in studying. Of course, there were sports, and sports were, at that time, when I went to school, a male thing. But I found out that I wasn't that interested in sports because, one, I didn't know why it mattered, and two, the more manly men went into it and they congregated with the other manly men, and then when they were choosing up a team, I was the kind of person that was the last chosen, because I was, and I think I'm safe to say, a weird nerd, dweeb, dork, sissy boy. When does it hit? Sometime early for me in elementary school, where it hit that I loved learning. I loved math. Math was very easy for me, as was science, but the thing is, learning capitals of countries, learning what the country did. National Geographic magazine was really big in our house, and that was like going to school. In fact, I think there were a lot of magazines. I grew up overseas. From 4th grade through 11th grade, I was in Germany. the magazines introduced one to the life of those countries. When you had a good teacher, wow, it showed across the board. I mean, before junior high school and high school, teachers taught all the subjects. If you had a teacher, they did the math, the geography, the history, the science. If they loved teaching, often they were not only skilled in that particular subject, but they wanted to open the doors in your minds to those subjects. And that was really a delight. I can say I didn't skip much school. I didn't see that being on the sidelines was better than being in the school and learning. Whether it was learning the capitals of countries or learning the art and culture of a country. Growing up overseas outside of the United States, that had a particular flavor, because if you grew up in the U.S., you mostly were educated about U.S. politics and its history, where growing up in Germany, we learned about all of Europe. I remember book bags and having pens and pencils. My mom was a school teacher, so I had that extra bonus. So I look back on that life and going, I loved going to school. And yes, I got good grades, but that was not it, really. It was ideas and information, and that day when something new is opened up to you. It was really fascinating. I grew up at a time of World War II. My father fought in World War II and Korea. I lived in Germany, which is the country that really started World War II. And so you were right there, and you lived in these countries that had castles from the medieval times, where in the U.S. there were no castles. So often the country itself spoke to history and to commerce as well. You know, I went on to get an MD degree, and I'm sure it had to do with how much I liked being in school, liked being in an environment of inquiry and mind work, going every day instead of to a job often that I wouldn't like. I would go to a class, get engaged in the class, meet people in the class. There were always, quote, best friends, and when one started dating, there was also that class. So I was a school lover. I am a school lover. And I can honestly say I think I brought school home, and that I have been studying ever since. And school helped me learn to like the studying of something.